Okay, good morning, everybody. Today we're going to start talking about social studies skills, and I'm going to give you some notes here. And the best way to do this at home, my recommendation is watch it and pause it. Take the notes first. All right, just take the notes, get them in a notebook. Then come back and rewatch it and listen because I talk about a lot of things that aren't in the notes. Um, that I want you to understand. So that's kind of the way to do it, and it's pretty short because I go through the notes a lot quicker than I would in class because you can pause it and do what you have to do. So that's the story. All right, let's head over and look a little bit at the notes. And what we're going to be doing is talking about social studies skills. And I said last week I would give you this ability to really teach you a skill to be able to evaluate information. So let's begin with something called research. And I usually ask my classes what's research, and you may have an idea in your head. Usually, students tell me it's this scholarly pursuit or going to the library and doing all kinds of looking up for a class project. And certainly, that's a type of research. And you don't have to have this note, so make sure that you don't take it. This is a dictionary definition, scholarly or scientific investigation or inquiry, and it goes very closely with what I just kind of said and what students think about. But I don't like that definition. It's not a very street smart definition. It's not very, kind of plain and understandable. Instead, and I do want this in your notes, is if you're in need of information on a topic, you must do research to acquire it. And I always ask students, do you guys research? And the truth is, you're like voracious researchers, which means you research all the time, all day, every day. What time's the game? Where'd you get those shoes? How much did that cost? Where did you get that? When's the new music come out? When's the new video game? Is the new video game good? That's all research. You don't think of it that way, but it is. It certainly is. And since we research, we have to have places that we get our information, and we call those sources. And there's two basic types, and I think you've heard of these in the past probably. If not, no big deal. There's a primary source. Very simply, a source that was there. That's what firsthand knowledge means. They were at the event, okay? If you're talking about Vietnam, if someone writes a book about Vietnam 10 years after who was never there, they're not a primary source. But if someone was there fighting in Vietnam in the jungles and the rice paddies, and they write a book about their experiences, they are a primary source. Secondary source is a source that was not present at the event. They either interviewed people who were there or looked up statistics. They did their own research from other sources and then created a new source called a secondary source. I always ask students which is good and which is bad. And it's a trick question. Neither is good or bad, per se. We like primary sources in general over secondary sources, but there can be some really bad primary sources. If you had someone from a white supremacist hate group attend a civil rights march, they're probably not going to be a very good source. They're a primary source, but they have some other issues that we're going to learn about. Whereas a secondary source can be a college professor who meticulously researches and gathers great information and writes just an excellent book about a topic. And it may include information from many primary sources, but it's still a secondary source and can be a great source of information. So the real answer is it depends, on which is a better source. Like I said, we do like primary sources because there's no filter there. We always in class, I do that game of telephone where, I say one thing to the first person in the first row, and by the time it gets all the way to the back, it's not even close anymore to what was originally said. Every filter it goes through, takes something away. And the example I give is, very simple. If someone comes in after your lunch into your seventh period class and says, "Oh man, there was a fist fight in the cafeteria, and I was right there, and dude got punched in the nose, and look, I got blood on my shirt." Well, if you got blood on your shirt, you're a primary source. All right, these are just some examples of primary sources. You can look at those in your own time. You don't necessarily need that as a note unless you're struggling with the difference between a primary and a secondary. I will throw one example out here that often eludes students. A photograph, if it has not been tainted, if it has not been changed or messed with, is still a primary source. That photographer was there, it was taken at the event. You can only glean so much information from it, but it's still a primary source. Secondary source examples. Oh, let's go back. That was a little quickish. And they're just any source that wasn't there becomes a secondary source for information. I had to blow my nose. All right, onward we roll. Okay, so here's where the rubber meets the road. Here's where the important stuff is. How do I judge the value of sources? And there are very specific ways. And what we're going to do is use something I call the credibility checklist. It starts with who created it. We have to figure out who created something. Can we trust this source? Do they have an established reputation for accurately portraying events? We looked at some things last Friday on the internet that were put by the Russian government on Twitter and other social media to advance, the campaign for the Republicans. And a lot of them were made by the Army of God or made in America. And the truth is, we don't really know who that is. If you can't judge or you can't figure out who created something, automatically, it cannot be a good source. Good sources identify who they are and who's behind it. If you look at CNN or Fox News, you know right away who the reporters are, the anchors, the editors, the people who own the network, who run the network. Those things are easily available and easily findable. The next part of this is once we figure out who created it, do they have a good reputation for telling the truth? And that's it. Have they told the truth in the past? Let's go back to my fist fight example. If someone comes into your 7th period class and says, oh man, there was a fist fight in the cafeteria and 2 guys got into it, it turned into a whole cafeteria riot and a food fight and it was crazy, and you're sitting there going, wow. Go to your next class, you have a friend who eats that lunch and you ask him about it. I heard it was crazy at lunch, and that friend says, nah, it was just 2 kids yelled at each other. Mr. Buzzard sent them to the office. You're like, yeah, but what about the food fight and the riot? And they said, no, none of that happened. Well, the next day that kid comes into class, the one who told you about all this, and he tells you some crazy tale that happened here or there, you're probably less likely to believe that person because they have a bad reputation for telling the truth, for accurately portraying things. Next up is bias. And this goes back to when I was talking about primary sources with, white supremacist groups at a civil rights rally. If a source already enters into an event one way or another in their mind, backing one side or another, they're probably not a good source of information. Back to the fist fight, just for easy example. So if there's a fist fight and the person you're asking about who won is the best friend of one of the people in the fight, you might not be able to trust what they were saying that much. Not because they're liars or anything, but they see it a certain way because it's their friend who was in the fight. Oh, it was kind of even. Everybody else might tell you, oh, no, he got his butt kicked. That's what happened. But, people don't want to say that about their friends. That's why, when we look at some of the news today and we think CNN, well, they might definitely be biased in favor of the Democrats, and Fox, they might definitely be biased in favor of Republicans. It hurts them as a news source, certainly, when we feel that way. The next thing is hidden agenda. This is a tough one, but we're going to learn a little bit about it tomorrow. But basically, a source is pretending to do one thing, when really, in the end, they're trying to do something else. And like I said, we'll hold off on that one, and we're going to come to an example the next time you guys have class. We're going to watch some videos and see that. Okay, good sources of information agree with other sources. If you look at a news story, and you look at it on USA Today and CNN and Fox, and it's a basic story about something that happened, the statistics are going to agree, the information's going to agree. They might have slight variations in things because they might have gotten different information as far as the statistics will still agree, but one may have something the other doesn't because they had some research. But in the end, good sources agree with other good sources. And we say to really trust a source, we have to find two other very reliable sources that agree with that source. Next up is support. Do they support their statements with facts or just emotional appeal? If someone comes out and says, oh, we need to get rid of every gun in America because guns kill children and it's a dangerous scourge on this country, that may tug at people's heartstrings, but it's an emotional appeal. Whereas if someone comes on and has a statistical, factual based argument where they say, well, FBI crime statistics show that in 2017 there were this many children killed with guns, that's this percentage, and they give really good statistics and really good support, then we give them more, we rely on them more as a good source of information. Now, for support to be good, it has to be accurate. So if you're giving facts, if you're giving that, they have to be accurate, and we have to know where they come from, because we have to be able to go ourselves and verify and check that these facts are a real deal. And we're going to see there are times where people put a bunch of support and then it's inaccurate. And the example I give is I had students once who were doing a research project on the civil rights movement, and they found a site called MLK.org. And I got some papers turned in that said that Martin Luther King was a murderer, and Martin Luther King was a communist, and Martin Luther King wanted to overthrow the American government. And so I got some of the kids and I said, where did you get this? And they showed me the site, which was in their bibliography. Well, it turns out that site was bought, purchased, and created by a hate group. And so, yeah, did they have a lot of support? Yeah, they gave all these statistics. The problem is you really couldn't look them up anywhere because they didn't really say where they got them. And, they're biased, so obviously that hurts them. But their support, when you could look it up, was wildly inaccurate. It was just made up things. So you have to make sure, just because there's a lot of numbers, doesn't mean it's good. Okay, you could throw propaganda in your notes. We're going to do a little bit with it in this unit, but not a ton. And that's all. That'll be the notes for today. I know this seemed quick, but by the time you write the notes, by the time you go back through and re-listen to the presentation, it'll take you a good, hour, probably 45 minutes to do that at the very least. And then the next time that we have class, we're going to have live class, and from there, we'll finish up the beginning of this unit, and we'll start from there, and that'll kind of get us for the week. All right, very good. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and let me close this out.